When you're out and about enjoying the beautiful countryside in Kent, do you keep an eye out for ticks? Have you been warned that they can carry something called Lyme disease? If you found one attached to you, would you know what to do about it? Former England rugby player Matt Dawson revealed this week that he had to undergo heart surgery. That's right, heart surgery, after a tick bit him as he walked around in a London park, leaving him with what's called Lyme disease. Morven-May MacCallum is from Lyme Disease UK, and Andrew McGuinness from Whitstable has suffered Lyme disease and has written a book based on his experiences. Glad to say that they both join us now to learn a little bit more about it. Thanks for joining me, Morven-May and Andrew.
Hello, good morning.
Let's start with you, Morven-May. What is Lyme disease? What does it actually do?
Well, Lyme disease is a bacteria that can be spread through ticks and through an infected tick bite. Not all ticks carry Lyme disease, but there is a majority of them that do, and it's becoming more and more prevalent, which is why awareness is so important. And there are some doctors that think Lyme disease can also be spread through other insects, such as mosquitoes and horseflies, but unfortunately we don't have enough research to confirm that, so it is mainly the ticks that you have to watch out for.
Let's hear from Andrew about what it's like to experience Lyme disease. How are you affected, Andrew?
Well, I mean, I call myself a Lyme survivor as well as a sufferer, but when I was first infected, the symptoms were like stroke. I was diagnosed with a stroke. Then that was sort of overturned. Then I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a possible brain tumour, all sorts of things really that they weren't quite sure about, and turned up to be like a dead end. And I was sort of, not abandoned, that's too strong a word, but I was sort of left not knowing what it was, but the symptoms were so severe, almost catastrophic. The physical signs and symptoms were quite devastating.
So this is a very serious disease. It's not like a common cold or a little bit of infection in your arm.
No, I mean, it can start with flu-like symptoms. Sorry, Morven.
Go ahead, Morven-May.
No problem at all. No, I mean, Lyme disease, if it's caught early, it can, for most people, be treated quite easily. But unfortunately, for the vast majority of people who get Lyme disease, they are often misdiagnosed because the blood tests are very inaccurate. And unfortunately, doctors do go on the blood tests when it comes to diagnosing. So a lot of people end up being wrongly diagnosed with a variety of different things. And because they're left untreated, it becomes incredibly crippling. People become completely housebound, bedbound, huge amounts of pain from their joints, their bones, and it becomes neurological. It's a really, really devastating illness.
How can you tell if you are developing Lyme disease, Andrew? What were the initial symptoms?
My symptoms were quite spread out. I did develop the rash. Not everyone gets the erythema migrans rash. I did, but that was misdiagnosed, so I wasn't receiving any treatment. So I developed flu-like symptoms, fatigue, which eventually turned into a sort of an explosion of the infection, which spread to my brain. I'm sort of 70-80% recovered now, but it was a long journey.
How long?
Which is all over 2 years. And I lost my work. I was a freelance creative writing lecturer at 2 universities. Unfortunately, couldn't continue that work. I just had to focus on surviving, getting better. I wrote a book, anatomized a novel about it, just as a cathartic process, because the psychological impact of this quite devastating disease, I needed to get it out, and I'm a writer, and that's how I did it. But it's published last month.
What's it called?
It's called Anatomized.
Mm-hmm.
And it's published, May is Lyme Disease Awareness Month, so I wanted to coincide with that to raise extra awareness, but also, like I said, it had this sort of psychological positive effect on me, and I was pleased to contribute in that way to the awareness.
Would it be all right, Andrew and Morven-May, if we get a caller who'd like to ask you a question? Is that okay?
Yeah, no problem.
That's great. Shirley in Gravesend's called in. Shirley, good morning.
Good morning, Limpet.
We've got Morven-May and Andrew, if you like, your expert panel here, and I think you'd like to ask a question.
Well, no, I don't really want to ask the question, Limpet.
Okay.
I just wanted to put a slightly different angle on the situation. My daughter was misdiagnosed in 2004 with a rash on her leg that was obviously, we know the target, that was a tick bite, but was misdiagnosed as fungal. She was then diagnosed with ME, and fibromyalgia, which she's had all of her adult life suffering from ME. We now know her body was fighting Lyme disease. But the only reason she was diagnosed was because she diagnosed herself and had blood tests done abroad because she's had no help from the NHS. We have to fly abroad for any treatment you want. But the worrying thing is she's given birth to 2 children in this time. I have a beautiful 5- and 3-year-old granddaughters who are potentially carrying Lyme disease. They are showing mild signs now, and we are extremely concerned. So we also want to get out there. Her neighbour's little girl of 6 was actually bitten by a tick in the school playing field last week, rolling about as children do on the grass. When she came home, her mother thought she had red paint on her neck, because obviously that's what children do when they're at school. She scraped it with her nail and a tick came out.
From underneath the skin?
Yes.
My goodness. Is it Morven? You wanted to ask or make some commentary to or to converse with Morven-May and Andrew about this, so let me not interrupt you, Shirley.
Well, I'm just trying to... It's too late for my family. There is no chronic Lyme. As Andrew said, you virtually learn to live with it, and it's costing hundreds of thousands of pounds every month in supplements and antibiotics because you don't get enough antibiotics on the NHS. So we're now probably going to multiply that cost by 3 times. But my main concern is I don't want anybody... I'm sorry, I'm doing this for my granddaughters and I'm getting a bit upset.
No, of course.
No, please.
I don't want anybody else to go through what we're going through.
I completely
I'm just trying to make people aware. If we can get this out there in schools, colleges, mums groups, anyone, to protect all these children that are so at risk now. I have a doctor in Lincoln, who would like to shut down Thetford Forest because it's so prevalent where she's practicing. There's so many children out there that are at risk. And mums, I watch them in the park. They're just unaware.
Yeah.
Morven-May, you wanted to say?
Yeah, firstly, I think you're incredibly brave for coming on air and saying all that, because your story sounds incredibly similar to mine. I've had Lyme disease for 10 years, and like that, I was wrongly diagnosed for a very long time. And we had to go privately in order to get a diagnosis, and it is absolutely devastating having to go through that. And the burden on your family is huge, and I think you're incredibly brave for coming on air and sharing your story with us. And we completely agree with you at Lyme Disease UK. We do a huge amount to raise awareness in schools with doctors. Also on a political level, we're trying to incite change there as well, because we know just how devastating this disease is and what a huge effect it has across the entire country and just how prevalent it's becoming. So we do a huge amount to try and raise awareness, but we're obviously limited to what we can do because we are a non-profit organisation, so we are restricted by our funds. But we do everything that we can to try and raise awareness, and any help that we can get in doing that is most greatly received.
Can I just interrupt there? Your funds and money are the whole crux of all of this problem, both from your point of view and the government's point of view, I'm sure. There is another, I'm sure you know of the Caldwell Foundation.
Yes.
The whole family, 11 family members have got Lyme disease. They are billionaires. And my daughter was speaking to her 2 days ago. I think they could be a great help in the publicity side of things as well. I don't know whether you have contact with the Caldwell Foundation, but I wonder whether more heads are always better to get together.
I think
Andrew?
Yeah. I was just going to say, Shirley, thanks for coming on and telling your story. It's all about stories, and they're not all bad, but I think the official line here, medically, and is that it's rare to contract. It's easy to diagnose and simple to treat. But the experience that I found personally, and also many thousands on the LDUK forum, you can go there and visit and discuss.
I'm on it myself, yes.
Yes, there's a similar experience, isn't there, Shirley? That people
I'm reading it every day.
Yeah, so support, that's essential. But really we need support from the medical community. There needs to be more understanding, more education, more research, but definitely more support.
Can I ask? Can I ask a question, which certainly I find interesting? When I was in the jungle, there's a name drop for you. Linford Christie was bitten by a tick, and it was quite complicated to get rid of it. Is there a standard way of noticing if you've been bitten by a tick, and it was on his scalp? And the second thing is, how do you remove a tick?
That's a really good question.
Let's start. I was just going to say the best cure is prevention in the first place. So use an insect repellent. Mozzie Guard is quite good. It's DEET free. You can use it on your kids and everything. It's really effective. But I think that's the first thing is really personally is prevention, protect yourself. But maybe Morven can say more about how to, if you have a tick is embedded, how to remove it.
Yes, definitely. It is really important that you remove a tick correctly, because otherwise you can actually increase your chances of getting Lyme disease. So it's really important that you never smother a tick. I hear a lot of people putting things like Vaseline or oil, and peppermint oil I think is a favourite at the moment. And these are actually very dangerous methods of removing a tick. So we always advise that you use a very fine pair of tweezers or a tick remover tool, which is personally what I always use. And you can get tick remover tools online. There's some vets are now stocking them as well. Hopefully some chemists and pharmacies will be stocking them too soon, because it is really important that you remove the tick correctly.
Is there a risk if you get it wrong, there's a little bit left inside?
Yes, it's always a danger. So it's really important that you remove the entire tick, which is why I quite like the tick removers, because I have always found them very effective in removing the tick very cleanly. And it's quite important after the tick bite that you draw a circle around where you've been bitten, so that if you do develop a rash in the coming days and weeks, sometimes it can take up to a month before a rash appears if you do get a rash, because a lot of people don't. I never had a rash when I was infected with Lyme disease. So if you draw a circle around the bite, you'll be able to identify very quickly if you're starting to develop a rash or skin irritation.
Thank you so much, Morven-May, MacCallum, Andrew McGuinness and Shirley in Gravesend, for speaking candidly about something which has affected you all in one way or another, and clearly has had some very challenging consequences. Hopefully that has been useful. Be careful. Make sure that if you do remove the tick, or when you do, if you're in that situation, you do so by having had a look at how to do it. Hopefully that has been helpful to you. It's this time of year when we're out and about. I suppose we have to be a little bit more mindful about that. What an interesting conversation.